So, in terms of what we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to be talking about menopause and training. Hopefully, that is what you have signed up for. I'll begin with a quick introduction to the session and to myself, then an introduction to menopause and definitions, just so we're all on a sort of common understanding of what we're talking about. And then the main subject that we're going to be looking at tonight is how to reduce the negative impacts of menopause on our training. And I'm splitting that into three main areas: energy and recovery, muscles, bones, joints, and aches, and other barriers. I'll give you a quick bit of information how you can find out more about the work that I do, and then we'll go into a Q&A. I'm hoping that we'll get to the Q&A by about 8 o'clock. So about an hour of me going through all the stuff that I just talked through there, and then about half an hour for questions. I can stay longer than half an hour if you want to, but as I will be talking about tonight, sleep is important, so I don't want to keep you up late. But yeah, should be about an hour to get through the presentation, and then about half an hour to go through questions that you've submitted in advance and any questions that you want to ask now. As I mentioned before, this session I've been organising in partnership with Danny from British Triathlon. So we and Teresa also, and other people who are on this call, are part of the Yorkshire and Humber Supporting Women and Girls in Triathlon Network. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a really brilliant group. We have a vision to be a vibrant triathlon community that removes barriers, challenges inequalities, and fosters a sense of belonging for women and girls, regardless of their background. We do that through communication, through promoting change at a club and local level, and by collaborating to raise the profile of triathlon. If you are interested in finding out more about our work, if you're in the Yorkshire and Humber network and you want to join us, give us a shout. If you're not in Yorkshire and Humber and you want to set up a network like that in your own area, give us a shout. If you're not triathlon club or member, but you would like to network with us, give us a shout. So when I send out the recording, I will include details of Danny, how you can get in contact with her and therefore the rest of our network, or she is on the call tonight. So if you've got specific questions, stick them into the chat and she will be able to answer them for you. Quick introduction to me. So why am I sitting here in front of you talking about this subject? So I did my first triathlon, the slide's probably out of date, or my memory's out of date, probably about 12 years ago. No, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Anyway, and I did that because I had reached a point in my life, I was having a whole load of sort of mental health issues, loads of stress in my life, and I decided I wanted to do something different. So I did a triathlon, and it was life-changing for me. It led to me changing career because I wanted to help other people understand the life-changing power of exercise. I trained first of all as a personal trainer, so I'm a qualified personal trainer. And then I went on to qualify as a triathlon coach. So I'm a level 3 triathlon coach working on a one-to-one level with my clients as well as at a club level. And I set up my company, Feel Fit with Lucy, which is working mostly with women to help women to experience the power of exercise. So in the majority of cases, that's working with people who want to do a triathlon or who want to take on some sort of fitness challenge, like their first 5K, their first 10K, whatever it is. But my approach is very much on supporting that whole health, that whole body. It's not just about your time across the finishing line, it's making sure that you get there happier and healthier. I'm very passionate about the impact of mindset and working on our mental health in terms of exercise. So I'm also a certified mental health and exercise coach, and I'm an accredited life coach to help my clients bring about that change, some of the changes we'll be talking about tonight. I compete at age group level. I've done a ridiculous amount of silly long cycling. I've done, what am I up to? I think 6 Ironman now. I'm just back from Kona from the Ironman World Championships, which is why this session is shoehorned in right at the end of October. And I've written lots about my own experience of menopause or peri-menopause and the impact on my own training. I've worked with various different organizations, Virgin, Run Mummy Run, as a sort of expert lead on endurance. I'm really passionate about the triathlon club scene or club scene in general. I've been head coach of 4 different triathlon clubs. And now my main focus is, as well as supporting my one-to-one clients and working with my local club, but is on a membership, which I launched earlier this year, because I wanted to be able to reach more women, to support them with coaching. So often coaching is out of reach for a lot of people, financially or time-wise or whatever. So I'll tell you a little bit more, with your permission, a little bit more at the end about my membership, but it's a cost-effective way of supporting women to get the support, to get the most out of their training, to feel better, to feel happier and healthier as they do that. Okay, so what are we talking about tonight? Menopause. So just a few quick definitions, first of all. What is menopause? So menopause is literally just one day, one moment in time. It marks the point in time where you have been without your period for a year. In the UK, the average age is around 51 years, but that can range from 45 to 55 is a kind of common range for menopause to occur, but it varies with age. The age and the impacts vary by race and by lifestyle. So South Asian women tend to have a slightly earlier perimenopause or menopause. Women of Afro-Caribbean origin also have a slightly earlier menopause, but tend to spend longer in perimenopause. In terms of lifestyle, smoking and alcohol and weight gain can increase the impact, and exercise and healthy diet can decrease the impacts, which is what we'll be looking at a lot today. In terms of perimenopause, this is actually the thing that we probably mean when we say, oh, I'm in menopause. Perimenopause is the point at which our hormones first start changing. It lasts on average 4 years, but it can be 10 years or even more than that. In terms of being diagnosed, and lots of people are sticking into the chat asking or sort of saying they're not sure which stage they were into. In terms of diagnosis, if you're at that age of around 50 or perimenopause, the sort of 10 years or so before that, chances are if you speak to the doctor, they're not going to be doing blood tests or anything to diagnose. They're just going to ask you about your symptoms. And the guidelines for doctors is that they should be able to tell if you're in perimenopause or menopause based on your age, your symptoms, and how often you have periods. So you're unlikely to need testing. So if you're not yet, or if you're not sure if you're in perimenopause yet, my strong advice would be to start noting down your symptoms, whatever that is, not just in terms of menstrual flow, but any symptoms you're experiencing. And I'm about to show you lots of the potential symptoms of perimenopause in a second. Start noting them down, keep them somewhere safe, so that if you want to speak to the doctor, if you want to get some help from them in terms of medication or whatever, or other support, that you've got that evidence of what those impacts are. It will make it a lot easier to have that conversation, and you're more likely to get support from them. And then in terms of what is post-menopause is basically the rest of your life. So at that point, all the changes we're going to talk about today are still occurring. The estrogen, the progesterone has declined, and so the impacts will remain, but it's not fluctuating. When we're in perimenopause, our hormones are all over the place, and that's why we kind of don't know if we're coming or going. The impacts change day to day. Post-menopause is much more constant, but the impacts are still there. So in terms of what are those impacts, I'm not going to go through this in loads of detail because I want to talk about actually how that then impacts on our training rather than the changes in our body, but it's important to have some sort of context. So on the graph there, you can see the changes in your estrogen or estradiol, but that's a form of estrogen, and progesterone through your life. So when we're in our normal reproductive years, or sorry, not normal, but when we're in our reproductive years, we have that constant cycle of our hormones leading to, all the impacts that we have through our menstrual cycle and our menstrual bleed. Then when we get to perimenopause, the hormones start going all over the place. It's not just that they decline in a sort of straight line, but they are going up and down, and the interplay between the estrogen and progesterone is changing because of that change. And that leads to a whole load of impacts. The biggest come from the decrease in estrogen. Progesterone is also important as well, but estrogen has the sort of biggest impacts. It's a master hormone that affects almost every type of cell in our body. So as it falls, it has a big impact on our body. Estrogen is protective of our cardiovascular system. So as it drops, we become more at risk of heart disease. We also experience potentially things like palpitations. Estrogen is really protective of our muscle and our bone. So again, as it decreases, we start to lose muscle, we start to lose bone, and the associated impacts like losing our strength, our power, more vulnerable to injuries, and it has an impact on our long-term quality of life. Estrogen helps to prevent inflammation. As it decreases, we get increased inflammation, which has impacts on our connective tissue. We get more aches and stiffness, more injuries because the tissue is less elastic. That has a particular impact on our vaginal and our bladder tissues, which become thinner. They lose their elasticity, making us more vulnerable to pain, more vulnerable to urinary tract infections. As I said, it has an anti-inflammatory effect. So that also means that our immune system becomes more compromised, our joint health, our cognition, our insulin sensitivity, our muscles and our bones, I've already said. It impacts on our metabolism because our muscles are where we store energy. So as we lose that muscle, we lose that ability to store so much energy. And the inflammation combined with that means we've become less sensitive to insulin. So we have issues in terms of weight gain, particularly around our stomach, an increased risk of metabolic diseases, things like type 2 diabetes. It impacts on our brain and our nervous system. So it interacts with other hormones to determine how they work. So we get things like brain fog. We get things like our sleep being interrupted because our thermostat, our hypothalamus, which is our body's thermostat, becomes dysregulated. So we get all these different impacts. And that all sounds really negative, and a lot of it is a bit negative. But I just want to kind of give that context as to how that fall in estrogen is leading to all those changes. And therefore, because it's having such a big impact on pretty much every cell in our body, why it's so important that we look at making changes to our lifestyle, to our training, to deal with these changes in the reduction in estrogen. So what does that look like in terms of actually how we experience it? I'm not going to read through all of these, but you can read through yourself. And again, you will get all these slides afterwards, so you can look at them in more detail. But that leads to a whole load of symptoms. Some people experiencing more. So about 80% of women experience symptoms, 25% experience severe symptoms. Still note, that means 20% won't experience symptoms. So it's not all bad, and not everybody has all of these things all the time, although sometimes it can feel like it. In terms of you guys, so you all answered the most common symptoms that you were experiencing. And by far, the biggest ones are related to this issue of fatigue and energy. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. And then followed by joints and injuries and niggles and all these things. And then there's the kind of the motivation side of things, mood issues, confidence, anxiety, depression, changing mood. You don't know if you're coming and going. The issue of weight gain, particularly around the stomach, and then the more cognition things, so the brain fog, the hot flushes. So what you're all saying is fairly consistent with those common symptoms I showed before. What I would note is that hardly anybody relatively mentioned hot flushes or night sweats. I think it was about 8 people in total, or it was mentioned 8 times. Whereas whenever we hear in the media and when we hear people talking about the symptoms of menopause, it's all about hot flushes. So it's really important, particularly for people who are entering this phase, who aren't there yet and think, well, I haven't got hot flushes and I've still got my period, so it can't be menopause. Yes, it absolutely can. All these other things are symptoms. Okay, so then we've looked at general symptoms. How does that impact us in terms of our training? So there's a stat that 30% of women are less physically active post-menopause. And that's despite the fact that exercise could actually really help some of the significant impacts of menopause. So we've talked about how as we lose estrogen, we become more vulnerable to heart disease. 1 in 14 women die from coronary heart disease, which is twice as many as die from breast cancer. We know that exercise can help reduce that impact. Over 80% of perimenopausal women experience mental health issues, and the highest rate of suicide is for women is among 50 to 54-year-old women. And we know that exercise can help with mental health. We know that exercise helps with things like preserving our muscle, our bone, all these things. So we know that exercise can help, but because of all these impacts of menopause, we're less likely to be doing it. What are those things that are stopping us from being so active? So the sort of main things, and this is the things I'm going to go through in the presentation now. And as you said in your feedback, we experience more fatigue. We just don't feel like we're recovering from sessions. We keep on doing the sessions and it feels like just that fatigue's building up. We're not recovering. We feel like we're getting more and more injuries. We can feel that we're losing muscle, that we're losing strength. We get more niggles. Everything just starts feeling harder. Somebody said, and I really related to it, it feels like I'm just running through treacle. And then we start experiencing more just general other barriers, things that would interrupt us with our training, things like heart issues, weight gain, vaginal dryness, mood, confidence. All of those things can have a really big impact in terms of our sort of willingness or ability to do exercise. So today I'm going to look through how we can try and minimize these impacts, address some of these issues. Before I do that, though, just to kind of note, I'm going to give you a whole load of information now. It's one thing having the knowledge. It's a very different thing creating the change. Creating change is hard. We don't like change. So it's not just a matter of here's all the knowledge, now you can go off and do it. We need to think about how we kind of turn this into action at our own level. First of all, I'm going to give you lots, and not all of it is going to apply to everybody. Everybody's at a different stage. So please don't feel that everything I say today, you have to act on. And even if you think all of it does apply to you, my very strong suggestion is that you don't try and do everything in one go, but you work on one thing at a time. So make a list of everything that I've said, and you'll get the resources afterwards as well to help you summarize those recommendations, but just work on one thing at a time. Work on building habits. So often we think, oh, I need willpower to get this done. Willpower runs out. Willpower is exhausted. We want to build habits. So do one thing consistently till it becomes a habit, till it's not an effort to do it, then bring in the next thing. And be aware of the importance of mindset. There's going to be a lot of times when things that I suggest tonight, you're going to go, I don't want to do that. That sounds too hard. Or, oh, it's not fair. I used to be able to do this. Ask yourself if that thought is helping you. If you are resisting the change, it's just leading to conflict. It's leading to increased stress. So rather than sort of getting stuck in this, it's not fair, I used to be able to, maybe think about moving on to acceptance. Now, that doesn't mean you just accept all the bad things that happen. We can still act on trying to make a difference, but rather than wasting our energy and fighting the fact that it's happening, let's put our energy into what can help us. And let's look for where we can get support, whether that's friends, whether that's talking to your coach in your club, or if you have a one-to-one coach, talking, building the discussion in clubs at a club level, so that this I don't think it is a taboo anymore. It's certainly less taboo than it used to be, but let's normalize talking about it and the impacts of it. If you have a coach who doesn't talk to you about menopause, if you have a one-to-one coach who isn't talking to you about menopause, bring it up with them. If it's impacting on your training, you've got to talk about it. And as I said, if you don't have support from any of those areas and you're looking for more support, I'll let you know about my membership at the end, in case that would help you kind of have the support to try and make some of the changes that I'm going to be talking about tonight. And then just one more thought. And when you see the little face, you can't really see it, but it's a little thought with a happy face and a smiley face and a sad face in there. That's kind of when I'm flagging up there's things where your mind might question this or rebel against it. So sort of to look for where those thoughts are going. And this might be one of them. So if what you were doing before isn't working, change it. So often we find that something's not working, so we think, oh, I need to do more. I need to do more. I'm not losing weight. I'm putting on weight, so I need to do more of trying to, eat less, because that's what I used to do. Remember, we have got different hormones. I just talked about how the change in estrogen leads to all these changes in your body. So if what you were doing before isn't working, then let's look at doing it differently rather than just trying to do more of the same. So let's look at the importance of recovery. As I said, the sort of biggest issues that you guys were feeding back was the issues around fatigue, energy, lack of sleep, and joints and injuries. So all of these things are impacted or relate to recovery. Quick reminder on how we build fitness. We build fitness by breaking down our body and then rebuilding stronger. So we sustain sort of micro trauma at a very local level. And as our body rebuilds itself stronger, we get fitter, we get faster, we get stronger. But so it's important to remember, we don't get fitter from training, we get fitter from recovery from training. And that's really important to stress. We put so much emphasis on training. We have our training plans, we go to training sessions, we think about our training, we talk about our training, but we need just as much emphasis on recovery. If we get that balance wrong, if we're doing more training and not getting enough recovery, or if we're doing exactly the same amount of training, but our recovery isn't so effective because that decline in estrogen is impacting on our ability to recover, we get injured, we get ill, we get run down, we get overtrained, we just get that general feeling of feeling absolutely knackered. So as estrogen declines, as it increases, as estrogen declines and impacts on our ability to recover, we need to do more to protect our recovery. And all the things that we kind of got away with before, we kind of think we know we should do that, but I seem to be getting away with it. This is probably the point when we stop getting away with it, and we need to put more intention into all of those things. And if you are here as a pre-menopausal person, don't wait until you get to perimenopause to make these changes. Start making them now. They'll have health benefits for you now. They'll have more impact if you make those changes now, but it's also a hell of a lot easier to make the changes when you're in that pre-menopause stage rather than when you're in the chaos and the emotional turmoil and everything of being in peri or post-menopause. So, oh, sorry, the P's dropped off my sleep there. But anyway, so in terms of the key ingredients for recovery, we talk, people get, and especially triathletes, because we love our gadgets, we talk about, the Theraguns and the cold water immersion and all of that. But the key ingredients, the biggest bang for your buck, is time between sessions to allow your body to adapt. Sleep is when we recover, and our diet. Diet is the building blocks of our recovery. So we need to make sure that we're working on all of those, and I'll go into all of those in more detail. The key barriers to recovery are stress and inflammation. And I'm talking at a chronic level. Short-term stress is good. That's what forces us to adapt. But when stress is constant, when inflammation is constant, that is harmful in terms of blunting our recovery response. What impacts on that stress and inflammation? Well, our hormones. I've talked about how as our estrogen decreases, our body's inflammation increases, and our body's ability to start recovering doesn't turn on as quickly as it used to. So we delay our recovery process. It means it takes us longer to recover. We feel more achy. We feel more fatigued. Training is a stress. We know that training is amazing for our mental health. It helps us to relieve stress, but it is also a stress on our body. So if we're having issues with recovery, if our recovery is decreased, maybe we need to look at either reducing or at least changing the type of training that we're doing. Life is a stress. We know that, a million different sources of stress from life. Can we change any of those things to reduce stress? Things like putting in more boundaries, things like reducing perfectionism. If we can't change the root cause of that stress, then what can we do to reduce it once it occurs? So things like breathing practices, long, slow breaths out. There's a million apps there that can help you with breathing practices, but that can be really powerful to reduce stress, which is not just about us feeling better in the moment, but reducing the harmful impacts of stress on our body over the long term in terms of our health and in terms of its impact on recovery. And diet. I've already said diet is the building block of our recovery, but a poor diet can lead to further stress and inflammation. So things like ultra-processed foods, things like high sugar foods, feeds that inflammation process, which then blunts our recovery. So how do we optimize our recovery and have more energy? How do we put what I've just said into action? So first of all, like I say, time between sessions. We need to get to know our new limits. We need to get to know or re-know our body. I found when I first went into perimenopause that it was like I started working with a new client. I had to get to know myself from scratch. All my prior assumptions of what I could do, what my body could do, all of the things that I just took for granted went out the window, and I had to relearn what I could do. And it wasn't as simple as I can do this, I can do that, and if I do that, I need to do that, because it changes day by day. So it was about listening each day to see what I could do. We need a focus on quality over quantity. So making sure we're not just heaping more training on, especially going back to that, don't keep doing things that don't work. We go, oh my God, I'm getting slower. I just need to do more. Let's make sure we're getting that quality in there. Let's make sure it's effective training. We need more time for recovery. So we need to be looking at spacing out those longest and the hardest sessions, especially running, because the impact of running means that it has, we need more recovery time from it to prevent ourselves from getting injured. We need to plan in extra recovery time around those harder sessions. So if you don't already, I would really, really recommend that you're taking at least a recovery day once a week, maybe more, but at least one recovery day a week where you're not training. For me, it's the day I don't put Lycra on. And a recovery week, which is not that you do nothing, but where you reduce your training intensity, you reduce your training load to give your body that chance to recover. And I will either put that in time with your menstrual cycle. So if I'm writing a plan for a client, in time with their menstrual cycle. So when they feel least able to do the hardest sessions because of where they are in their menstrual cycle, that's when their rest week comes. Or if you don't have a menstrual cycle or it doesn't impact you in that way, then I'd probably, by the time we get to perimenopause, it would be every third week. We traditionally talk about a recovery week being every fourth week, but by the time we get to perimenopause, probably looking at it being every third week, depending on what your training load is. And then most importantly, well, two things. We need to be flexible and we need to adapt. So you can have your recovery day and you can have your recovery week, but that doesn't mean that you can then just go, yep, and I'm train on all the other days. You need to get used to listening to your body, seeing how it feels and seeing if it's appropriate to train on that day based on how you feel. Being flexible and being ready to adapt your training. And most importantly, giving yourself permission to listen to your body. So again, this is one of the things where our mind really challenges and goes, but I've got a training plan, but I've got a goal, I need to do it. Remember, the only effective training is the training that you're recovering from. So if you're not recovering from it, there's no point in just heaping more and more training on there. We need to listen to our body. We need to see if we've recovered, if we're ready to train again. And if not, sometimes the most effective training session is the one that you don't do, the rest that you take instead. So second ingredient of recovery, fuel. If you are under-fueling your training, you're risking injury, you're risking making less progress in your training, you're risking weight gain, and you're risking being hungry. Let me stress that again. If you underfuel your training, you are risking weight gain. And so often, we've known all our life, if we eat less, we lose weight. And then suddenly we get to perimenopause, and that doesn't work anymore. That equation isn't working. And there's so many other reasons why we're putting on weight while we get to perimenopause. But one of them is that if we're not fueling our training, our body tries to do the training session and goes, oh God, she's not feeding me. She's not giving me the energy I need. I'm going to save what I've got. I'm going to hang on to it. So our body starts deliberately putting on fat to store that energy, to deal with the fact that we keep on effectively kind of starving our body, going into these sessions without enough fuel to get the session done. So we need to make sure that we are fueling our training. We can still be looking potentially at reducing our calories, but not around our training sessions. And as I say, there's lots of other reasons why we're putting on weight that we want to deal with first. And then again, as I say, if you're underfueling your training, generally it just means we become more hungry. So either we're just in a horrible mood, or we end up eating a whole load of stuff that isn't the most useful stuff to be eating at the most useful time anyway. So let's look at fueling our training sessions. What does that mean? We want to fuel our training with carbs for any session that's over about 60 to 90 minutes. Or if we've been fasting, and I really wouldn't recommend doing fasted training at all, but by fasting here, I mean fasting overnight. So if you're not eating overnight, which most of us don't, we have in effect been fasting. So if you're training first thing in the morning, make sure you're taking on some carbohydrate with that training. It doesn't need to be sitting down for a whole, big breakfast or anything, but making sure we've got some carbohydrate. That could be a banana, some rice pudding, some overnight oats, whatever works for you, but something simple. That doesn't mean you have to get up hours early to digest it, but something simple that's going to mean you've got carbs in your system when you do that session. We also want to make sure we're getting enough protein. I have only worked with one woman ever who was already getting enough protein when I started working with her. We want to be aiming, if we are an active menopausal or post-menopausal woman, we want to be aiming for about 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, up to 2 grams or even more. I'm not going to go into detail about how you calculate that, but really, I'll quickly go into detail. So tomorrow, most of us eat the same things most days. Tomorrow, when you have your breakfast, look at the ingredients, look at the nutritional information, see what your portion size is. I don't believe in weighing your food every day, but you might need to weigh to work out what your portion is and see how much protein you get in for breakfast. Do the same for what you typically eat for lunch, do the same for what you typically eat for dinner. See what that adds up to. For most of us, it's going to be way under where we want to be. Don't then go, oh my God, Lucy said I had to get to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight every day. I can never get there. I'm just going to give up. It's overwhelming. Instead, say, well, where am I now? And where can I start to add it in? Where could I add in a little bit more, whatever it is, at breakfast to increase it at breakfast? Where could I add in a little extra snack throughout the day? Maybe it's about having a shake in there, whatever. Making sure that we're getting protein in soon after training as well, to help that immediate recovery process, but generally across the day, looking to get to that 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you're not doing either of those things, and if you are constantly fatigued, if you're getting limited progress in your training, if you keep on getting injured, if you're putting on weight, try those recommendations around increasing your fueling, both the carbs around training, and then the protein, and particularly protein after training. In terms of sleep, so that's fuel, and then the third ingredient for recovery is sleep. Here's some recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them now just because of time, but again, you'll get these slides so you can look through them. You can see the ones in bold are the sort of biggest kind of bang for your buck, but all of those things are really worth working on. Whenever we talk about sleep, it's a really emotive, kind of contentious subject, and we get more stressed about the fact that we can't sleep, and then we start, stressing about sleep. As you look at that list and anything I've talked about today, but focus on what you can do to promote sleep rather than what you can't. So, people always go to that list and go, I can't do that because of the kids, or I can't do that. Fine. Don't worry about the ones you can't do. Focus on the ones that you can do. Again, as I said before, try and focus on making one change at a time rather than trying to do everything in one go. And rather than saying, I don't have time, and asking, rather than going, oh, I just haven't got time to add in that extra thing, whatever it is, ask yourself how much more time you'd have if you slept better. When we don't sleep well, we become so inefficient. Everything takes us 10 times longer. Spending a little bit of extra time on trying to get better sleep is probably going to mean you're more productive, get more done in the day, as well as all the cascade of other benefits in terms of your training, in terms of your health. in terms of the impact on weight gain, in terms of your mood, concentration, all those other things. So quick recap. And we're, Teresa, this is when we're going to go into the breakout groups, if you're able just to start setting that up. So recap of the points I've talked about so far. Listen to your body, adapt your training, and take on more recovery. And remember that the only effective training is the training that you can recover from. Fuel your training. So make sure you've got carbs for any session that's over an hour or first thing in the morning. Fuel your recovery. We're looking at 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. But again, start where you're at. Don't be aiming for that 2 grams straight off. And find your sleep non-negotiables and implement them. So I'm going to suggest we go into breakout rooms now, just so it's not me just talking and talking and talking at you. If you don't want to go into a breakout room, if you can't put your speaker on, or you don't want to go into a breakout room for whatever reason, that's fine. You'll get put into a room, but then just come back here or do whatever you want for the next 6 minutes or so. You're going to be in small groups of around 3 to 4 people, and you're going to have about 6 minutes, so not long. If you quickly introduce yourself, and then if you just talk through and like a minute or so per person on your initial reaction to the recommendations so far. So what are your thoughts? Have you got issues with what I've said? Have you got learnings? Have you got light bulb moments? Anything, just whatever comes to mind. And remember, as I said at the beginning, change is hard. You're likely to be feeling some resistance and going, oh God, I just can't do this or whatever. That's fine, but have a plan of how you're going to deal with it. So if you're not going to do these, have you got an alternative? If you're experiencing the impact of perimenopause or menopause, have you got an alternative to deal with it? Remember, you don't have to do everything at once, one step at a time. Are there sources of accountability? Or how can you build in that accountability? How can you get support? So that might be something you want to talk about, or you might just want to talk about the things I've talked about. Can you still see the main slides? Yeah, perfect. Right, so if there's any quick questions, pop them in and I'll do my best to be answering them as I go, either at the end or if I kind of see them now, I can answer them now. Somebody asked about my thoughts on protein powders. I'm a fan. Generally, I'm, food first, always better to get our food from real food sources. But especially if you're vegetarian, especially if you're trying to get to that 1.6 or more, it's really hard to get in enough protein. And particularly if we're trying to get something in straight after training, we're aiming for 30 grams of protein straight after training session. Protein powders, protein bars and things are just a convenient way. I would look for one that hasn't got a load of extra additives in there. I've just got a pure whey protein powder, and I mix that with a bit of milk and sugar or something for flavor myself, rather than something with a whole load of extra processed flavors in there. But yeah, I'm not saying it's essential, but if it means you're hitting that target, then I think it's worth it. I will look out for any other questions, but I will get kicked off on the next part. So in terms of those barriers to training, we've talked about recovery and energy and the things we can do to try and increase our recovery, increase our energy. The next one is the niggles, the injuries, things feeling harder, training feeling harder, feeling like we're getting slower. As we lose that protective impact of estrogen, we start to lose our muscle mass, our bone mass, the connective tissue, quality declines. All of these things happen as we go through perimenopause. 60% of women experience joint pain after starting perimenopause, which is a big barrier to us doing training. Women lose muscle mass from their 30s onwards of up to 8% a decade, and that accelerates after we get over 60, but starts increasing from perimenopause onwards. And a really scary stat of the 80% of people in the UK with osteoporosis, of the 4 million people in the UK with osteoporosis, 80% of women are women. So it massively affects women more than men. A post-menopausal woman's chance of an osteoporosis-related fracture is 50%. And of those who sustain a hip fracture, 10% die within a month and a third die within a year. Now, that can all feel very far off. That's, future me. I don't need to worry about that yet. But what we do now, whatever age we are now, what we do now has a massive impact on reducing those stats, on, meaning that we get through and we're the ones that don't get the osteoporosis, don't get those broken bones, don't have that life-changing impact of the broken bones on us. So what do we need to do to support our body through these changes? These have been my recommendations. We need to be doing mobility work, so movement around our joints, getting our body moving more. That's going to help us literally just move better. It's going to help to reduce that pain, reduce that stiffness. When you wake up in the morning, you just feel like everything doesn't work. Doing mobility work gets our body moving and reduces our chance of then getting injured. Stability training, so supporting our joints and therefore reducing the chance of injury. We need to be doing strength training, and that has to be accompanied by that sufficient protein and carbs that we just talked about, particularly that protein straight after training, to help us reduce the loss of muscle and bone. We want to be doing plyometrics, so not big jumping on big boxes, but little low level jumping that's going to help us to reduce the loss of bone. It's going to strengthen our bone, and it's also going to help us maintain our speed, our power, and our reactions, part of which means then we're less likely to fall over, as well as that we're going to get faster. Ditto balancing training to reduce our chance of falling over. We lose our sense of balance as we get older, so we want to work to preserve that. And pelvic floor engagement to reduce the chance of leakage, to reduce the chance of prolapse. In terms of what all that looks like in more detail, I'm not going to go through all of that slide. Again, you'll get these slides afterwards, so you can look at it in more detail. These are just rough recommendations of what you would do in each of those areas. The one that I want to stress, though, is the strength training. We want to be ideally, and where it's possible, we want to be lifting with heavy weights. We want to be doing a strength exercise where we can only do 5 to 8 reps with good quality. So that's not 5 to 8 reps and our techniques all breaking down by the end, but 5 to 8 reps with good quality. So a heavy enough weight that we couldn't do more than that. With the caveat that if you're not already doing strength training, please don't go out and find the heaviest weight you can do and do 5 reps and put your back out or whatever. We need to build up to it. We need to build our technique. We need to build our strength. We need to build our confidence. But long term, we want to get away from this, kind of little pink dumbbells and doing, 2K weights or whatever. We want to be lifting heavy to get that change in our muscle, to protect our muscle, to preserve our power, to preserve our strength, not just for our training, but for our quality of life. We need to maintain that muscle for our quality of life. Now, if all of that's sounding a bit overwhelming and you're looking at that slide going, I don't know what any of that means and I've no idea how to put that into action, have a look at your local gym. Gyms have changed a lot. I know a lot of women traditionally didn't like going to the gym or didn't like going to the weights area of the gym, but so many more gyms these days are offering sessions that are more focused on functional training rather than just lifting heavy weights, and that are more set up for women. So have a look and see if that works for you. Jeanette has just put body pump sessions are fabulous for strength training. I would slightly disagree. It depends. It obviously depends on the session you go to, and things might have changed since I was last working in a gym. But if you think about if you're doing an exercise for the whole of one track of music, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or whatever, you're doing too many reps. We want to be doing less reps and heavier weights. Again, I haven't been to a body pump class in a long time, so things might have changed. If that's the only option for you, then yes, go for the body pump. The body pump is definitely going to be better than nothing. Ditto Pilates and yoga, they're great. They're great for so many things, but for strength, they're not building that strength in the way that we want to. So have a look what classes there are, but a lot of gyms now do lifting sessions and a lot of gyms do, lifting for women's sessions. So have a look and see what's there. I also do a online session, which is either live or recorded and uploaded to my website, which covers all of those recommendations in there. So it's an hour-long session once a week, £20 for the live sessions, £10 a month for the pre-recorded sessions, and it will take you through all of that stuff. I'll be giving you more details about that at the end if that's useful. I also have free mobility sessions, a new sort of 10-minute session every week. I've just done a whole set of sessions on mobility for menopause, but anything that's in there would be relevant for menopause as well. They're all on my YouTube channel. Again, I'll send a link through when I send through the recording. So try and just add in a little bit more mobility into your week and you'll start feeling better for it. And Claire's saying that they're bringing out body pump heavy. Brilliant, perfect. And I completely agree with what George is saying. The best strength training is the one that you'll actually do. So if body pump is what works for you and that's the one you're going to do, then do it. If you don't want to go and lift heavy in the gym because you're not comfortable in the gym, but you're comfortable doing something with lighter weights at home, but you'll do it. So I absolutely agree. Whenever anybody says what's the best exercise, my answer is always the one that you enjoy, the one that you will do. In terms of what this looks like in a training mix, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because it is so dependent on you, your availability, how you're affected by menopause, and what your training goals are. But in general, we want to be getting a strength training session in 2 or 3 times a week. I find when I'm writing training plans for triathletes, that 3 times a week is a challenge because there's so much, all that other training in there. But it doesn't have to be a big long session. It could be just about adding in some plyometrics at the end of a run. It could be about adding in some HIIT stuff that we'll talk about in a second at the end of a bike session or as part of a turbo session or something. But ideally, we want to be doing that strength training 2 or 3 times a week. We want to be doing high intensity intervals. So that high intensity, that could be 8 seconds, that could be 15 seconds. The example I've given here is 30 seconds, where we are working as hard as we can. And then we are having enough recovery afterwards. So not your 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, more like 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off. 8 seconds on, 3 minutes off. We struggle with the idea of these longer recoveries, but if we're going to work as hard as we can, we need to make sure we're properly recovered so we can go again. You can do, there's a whole load of different interval sets, but we're not doing loads, 5 to 8 of these intervals. We want to be doing it on something where we can get that high intensity without risking injury. So it needs to be something where we're comfortable with our technique. We need to obviously do a good warm up before. So things like doing them on the turbo trainer can work really well. A rowing machine can work really well, or your ski erg. Kettlebell swings can be really good for getting that power in as well as getting that high intensity. We can be adding in some of that plyometric, that jump training I was talking about, but don't suddenly go off and do a whole load of jumps if you haven't trained it, if you haven't done them before, because you'll end up with a stress fracture or something. And we only want to be doing it once or twice a week. And to stress again, the recovery side is just as important as the training session. So not just going, I want to do the high intensity, I want to work hard, and I'll just take a short recovery because I want to go hard again. We need to make sure we get enough recovery to make sure that we can go as hard as we're trying to go to. We also want some low impact training, so something like walking, easy running. Almost everybody I work with, when I first start working with them, is running too fast. Your running is not about as fast as I can go in the time I've got available, but easy running, the running that you can do with your mouth shut. So making sure that you're not stressing your body more. And then we hear a lot, if you sort of follow any of the kind of main people talking about training and menopause, you'll hear all this about avoiding the grain zone, making sure we're doing those high intensity intervals, the strength training, and then low impact training. And that is fine. But if you are training for a triathlon, a sprint triathlon, a Olympic triathlon, a half marathon, a half Ironman, all of those things, they are in this gray zone. They're in this kind of bit between the low impact and the high impact. And if we want to be training for those races, I would argue we do need to be training in those zones as well. But we need to recognize that they do have a harder impact on our body. They generate more cortisol, which makes it harder for our body to recover. So we need to take that into account. If we're doing that training in that kind of zone 3, zone 4, not the really easy, not the really hard, but the bit in the middle, then we need to make sure that we're looking after our body and doing all the stuff we just talked about in terms of the recovery. And then I would argue we need to be thinking about our mindset as well. We get so stressed and upset about the fact that we're not, that we're getting slower or we're not making as much progress as we have done. We need to recognize that we do get slower as we age. We lose about 10% of our VO2 max every decade. We can reduce that. I'm working with people in their 70s who are still hitting PBs and stuff. We can use effective training to make sure that we're getting the most from our training, but at some point we're going to, run out of those changes we can keep on making to improve our training. And we have to accept that we are going to be getting slower. So my recommendation is we move the focus on from a focus on just a number, a PB, a number that we cross the finish line with, to what's the best I can do in a given situation, given my circumstances. If my life has been turned upside down by perimenopause this year, I'm not going to be able to get that same number as before, but I can still go out and do the very best I can and do justice to myself and the training I've done. And I can feel proud of that. It doesn't have to be about a number to validate us. Ask ourselves why that number, that PB, that number on the finish line matters to us so much. And maybe in terms of all of this does feel fairly negative, and there are lots of negative, really not fun impacts of perimenopause and menopause. But let's see if we can find the positives. I see perimenopause as this early warning system. It reminds me of the changes that I need to make. I spoke earlier about we can't get away with stuff anymore. We have been getting away with it potentially, but it's not good for us. So this is a reminder of things that we can do that can actually help us, age healthier, be having a better future, a better lifespan, a better health span than maybe our mothers did, than previous generations did. And maybe we can enjoy that act of starting to slow down a bit rather than everything having to be 100 miles an hour. Triathletes, runners, we're so motivated by these goals, do more, do more, do more. But maybe we can actually start to relax and enjoy that slowing down and take some of the pressure off ourselves. So to recap on that, the reduced estrogen means that our muscles and our bones and our joints are more vulnerable. So what worked before may no longer be enough. So we need to do more to support our body for now and for our future self. The things that I would recommend you're looking at are strength training with heavy weights, and strength training being the main one, but within that, I would include that mobility, stability, balance, jumping, pelvic floor work. That we're supporting our body to recover with protein and carbs. So 30 grams of protein immediately or as soon as possible following training. And that's part of that 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Adding in some of that high intensity training for the speed, for the power, and because it helps us with our insulin sensitivity, particularly if we've been putting on weight and that weight around the stomach, then doing that high intensity training can help with that insulin sensitivity, can help us to not be saving so much of the energy as fat. And then I would argue that maybe we need to look at some of that acceptance, accepting some of the change in our body, not just giving in, but accepting that there are changes happening and looking at setting our goals and our expectations, something that is challenging, but it's also realistic and moving beyond just this focus on numbers. So on to the final part. We talked about what's stopping us from exercising. Energy and recovery is an issue. The loss of muscle, the joint pain and everything is an issue. And then finally, I've got just a general barriers, things that we experience through perimenopause that get in the way of us exercising. So as we get older, as we go through perimenopause and that connective tissue becomes less elastic, we start experiencing more urine leaks, particularly active women. Up to 80% of active women experience urine leaks, which can put us off wanting to exercise and jump up and down. We can really work on training our pelvic floor. Even if you haven't had children, we still need to train our pelvic floor. We want to move on from just things like the Kegels that sort of start tense, but doing diaphragmatic breathing, helping our pelvic floor to relax as well as to strengthen. And I would argue we want to add that into our strength training. Vaginal dryness can be a massive issue in terms of discomfort, in terms of things like sitting on a saddle, in terms of your pants rubbing as you're running or whatever. Even if you're not wanting to approach the doctor about HRT, and I will talk about HRT in a second, but even if you don't want HRT for whatever reason, for health reasons, or you just don't want to, you can get locally prescribed vaginal estrogen that's only working at a local level and which can be really powerful in terms of helping to reduce that vaginal dryness. So that's worth speaking to your doctor about. You can obviously also get moisturizers and things as well. Sore boobs. I think only one person mentioned sore boobs. I have massive issues with sore boobs as I started into perimenopause. A well-fitting bra can save a mile over a marathon. So when everybody else is still running, you stop at mile 25. Everybody else has to go on to mile 26. That's the impact of a well-fitting bra just in life, nothing to do with perimenopause. But it can obviously then make a difference, giving you that support as you go through perimenopause. Chafing can be a big issue as well. When I just did I've done 2 Ironman this year. For both of them, I've had a full-on dress change at every stage of the race. So 3 different outfits for the 3 different stages because I just couldn't find anything else that fitted. So speaking to race organizers, have they got somewhere you can do a full change or whatever, but also lubricants that can help reduce that chafing, and just finding the clothes that work for you and using them. A lot of women find the chest straps chafe as well, but armbands often you have less chafing there. So the armband heart rate monitors can be a lot less painful. The weight gain on your stomach through menopause, I will talk about in the questions. 50% of perimenopausal women experience palpitations. It's common, but I would always see a doctor. There are other complications that can be there. So if you are worried about things like heart palpitations, I'd always go and see a doctor to get it checked out. Things that made a difference for me, I completely had to reduce caffeine. I'm now even decaf coffee, makes my heart go mad, but I've cut out caffeine pretty much entirely. Alcohol has a big impact, and I started taking magnesium, and that's all helped a lot in terms of palpitations. And then anxiety and depression. We know that exercise is good for mental health, but sometimes we can't do it because of, the joint pain, the injuries and everything. Movement is good. Daylight is good. So it doesn't always have to be about going out for a run, maybe just going for a walk, getting some nature. There's somewhere you can walk and sort of see nature, do that mindful walking, noticing what's around you. All of that can make a difference as well. In terms of other support outside of the lifestyle changes that I've been talking about, Menopausal hormonal therapy, or more commonly known as HRT, and this is from the NHS website, can help to relieve most menopause and perimenopause symptoms, including hot flushes, brain fog, joint pain, mood swings, and vaginal dryness. It can also reduce your risk of osteoporosis and heart disease. So that's from the NHS website, and they say that the risk of HRT are small and usually outweighed by the benefits. And I would completely agree in my experience and the experience of my clients, but you won't always get it right first time. So if you try HRT and it doesn't work for you, always go back to the doctor and see, can you change your dosage? Can you change the balance? Can you change the way it's administered to find something that works better for you? Obviously, for some people, it's contraindicated for health reasons. If you're worried about the risk of it, I would always say, but what's the risk of all the other stuff? So if the impacts of menopause are stopping you from exercising, leading to you being more stressed, all the stuff we've talked about today, and HRT could make a difference, you've got to put that in balance versus the potential risks of it. There's lots of love for shock absorbers coming up on the chat now. Lots of love for shock absorbers. And I'll come back to that question actually, Keely. Let me just finish through here. Creatine. So testosterone I'm going to talk about in the questions, but testosterone can help with sex drive, mood, and energy levels. And then the other thing, which is sort of well recommended for perimenopausal women, is creatine. It helps to support with building muscle mass and strength if it's accompanied by strength training and protein. But it also helps with cognitive function. So if you're having issues in terms of brain fog, memory, focus, mood, creatine can be really useful there as well. I'm not going to put you into breakout rooms. If there's time at the end, I will, but I'm aware of the time. So I'm going to keep going through the questions if that's okay. Before I go to the questions, or to give you some time to think about those questions, and I can see there's stuff already popping up in there, so I'm going to have a look through all of that. But if you've got questions, you can either, in a second, I'll invite you, if you want to unmute, you can unmute. Bear in mind, if you unmute, you will be in the recording, or you can type in and I will do my best to answer any remaining questions. Before I do that, I just wanted to flag up, if it's helpful, I talked earlier about the membership that I set up at the beginning of this year. As I say, I've thrown a lot at you today in terms of lots of information, and information is one thing, but making the change is another thing. So I didn't want to just give you a load of information and say, you're on your own now. I hope that the reason I set up the membership is to give women, it's just for women, female runners, triathletes, active women, support and coaching to help them make the changes. It's not just for menopausal women, it's for any woman, but make the support or give them the support to help them get the most from their training. So it's £25 a month. For that, you get a masterclass every month. Previous masterclasses have included nutrition, mindset, women's training, dealing with stress, how to create change. At the moment, we're looking at off-season, how to get the most out of your off-season, including some free turbo training plans. You get one-to-one coaching slots. There's a Q&A where you can just ask any of those questions you just want to get an answer for. And then we have a masterclass review. So if you had issues implementing that masterclass, you get a chance to come to that review and say, work through those issues so we can make sure you're actually putting into action the change that you want to. It includes Club Feel Fit that I talked about before, the strength and conditioning with mobility, stability, plyometrics, blah, 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 blah. The pre-recorded sessions are included within that, so you wouldn't have to pay anything extra for that. It includes the Mobility Monday, but everybody gets those for free anyway. It's also got, in the library, you've got my Feel Fit Foundations course, which is my signature course on creating all the foundations to underpin a happy and healthy life. It includes my race ready resources, so all the support you need to make sure you're ready for racing. And every session I've done is all saved in there, so you can look through them in your own time. Got lots of testimonials from clients who have said, the stuff that they've got from this. So Vic says that she's learned so much, gives you all the tools you need to achieve your goals. This person said the mindset section has been invaluable and they've transformed their life significantly in just a few weeks. Katie was inspired to change her diet as a result of the nutrition module. And she said within a month, she noticed a huge difference. She can't believe how much it's changed her mental and physical well-being. And she hasn't been ill since she started doing it. So those are just a few kind of people who found the benefit of the membership. I've got a special offer if you join tonight. So if you sign up by Sunday, you'll get your first month in the membership for just £5. So, sort of, I'd say no brainer, give it a go for £5, see if you find it helpful. If you want to take advantage of that offer, you can either scan that QR code or there's the short URL written there. I will be sending around details. I don't know if I'm going to get the email out tonight or tomorrow. But so if you want to sign up now, you go to the membership page on my website and that QR code or that URL will take you there. If you use that code, the coupon code MSHIP5, so MSHIP5, that will get you that first month for just £5. And if you sign up by tonight, I will also include a free coaching call with me once you've signed up. If you want other support without going for the membership, I put lots of stuff on my Facebook and my Instagram at Feel Fit with Lucy, and do lots of blogs, which I send out in my emails. So you can sign up for those if you're interested. Okay, I'm going to go into the questions I've got in already, and then I'll come to the questions in the chat. So lots of questions about testosterone, and I do this talk every year, and I've never had questions, I think, about testosterone before. So it's really interesting to see how much more it's growing, how much more women are taking it and seeing the impact of it or having it recommended and having questions. First of all, just to say that testosterone is unlicensed for treating women in the UK, but doctors can still prescribe it. So it's unlicensed, but it can be prescribed by a doctor. If your doctor is not comfortable with prescribing it, then ask them to refer you to a specialist, and that specialist should be able to prescribe it for you. It's currently in the UK only prescribed for low sex drive. So in terms of those other benefits I talked about on a slide or so before, you can only get it prescribed for low sex drive, and it's only prescribed for people who have been through menopause and who have tried HRT. Then lots of questions about what about in terms of competing. It is banned in competition and it is banned out of competition. That means you can't take it while you're competing, but it also means you can't take it in the run up to a competition or, any time at all. I contacted BTF to ask if they had any advice around, if you had a race coming up and you thought you might be tested, when should you come off testosterone to allow you, your levels to go to normal so that you could, be okay for testing. And they rightly said, and I kind of knew they would say it, but they can't give that advice. That would be, it is banned out of competition. If they gave that sort of advice, they'd be breaking two of the anti-doping regulations on complicity. So the official line is you cannot take testosterone in or out of competition if you are, well, you shouldn't be doing it at all, but particularly if you're likely to be tested. I would say it's a growing issue. As I say, I've seen it as a massive growing issue. So I would suggest that you contact your national governing body, whether that's British Triathlon, whether that's England's athletics, whatever sport it is you do, and raise it and keep on raising it. And we may get a change. The UK is part of WADA, it's part of global drugs regulation. So it's not just about the UK to make a change, but any sort of change we've ever seen in the world comes from people raising these issues. And if we don't raise it, it's certainly not going to change. So at the moment, according to the rules, you cannot take it in competition or out of competition. Let's see if we can get a change on that. I think I have answered all these questions. These are questions I received in advance, and I think I've answered them through the talk so far. But if you feel that I haven't, then please do shout, type into the chat, and I will try and clarify or add any more detail as you need it. These next questions I'm just going to do as quick fire, just so we have time to get on to other questions that people are asking now. That's not to deny that they're important. Every question, every issue deserves more time, but I'm just going to go through them really quickly. So does HRT affect training or does it help? Actually, I think I've just covered that one. Yes, generally it can help, but you need to make sure that you've got the dosage or the prescription that's going to work for you. If it's not working for you, go and see your doctor and see if you can get it tweaked to find the prescription, the dose, and the way of administering it that does work for you. Does everything eventually settle down again? So yes, we stop the chaos. We stop the one day to the next not knowing what's going on because the hormones stabilize, but the hormones stabilize at a much lower level than where they were before. So yes, it stabilizes, but estrogen is still reduced or gone right down, and therefore all those impacts carry on having an impact. So everything we've talked about today, we would still need to put into action. Sorry, one more point on HRT that I forgot to say. A lot of people say, I've got the pill. You're not the pill, but whatever format it comes in, but I've got the thing, I've got the drug. That's all right. That's going to sort everything. I would strongly, strongly recommend that you need to be making these changes as well as the HRT. So it's not just about taking the drug and that's going to sort everything. The things that we've talked about today are the things that we need to be putting into action anyway. The theme of this year's Global Menopause Awareness Month, I can never remember what it's actually called, but Menopause Awareness Month is lifestyle medicine. All the things we've talked about today, making sure we're not just turning to the drug medicine, but the lifestyle medicine, all the things that can make that impact. How to get maximum return on training time investment? I would say sleep and diet. So you're probably expecting me to say something in terms of training, but going back to this idea, training is only valuable if we recover from it. How do we increase our recovery or the quality of our recovery? Sleep and diet. Any supplements I should be taking to support menopause while training? So as I think I said earlier, I'm always about food first, not turning to supplements. But there are some things that can help. I'm also not a dietitian, so I can't, give you official advice, but I would say generally advising, if you are, particularly if you're feeling fatigued, check your iron levels. I would always recommend testing before taking iron. You can overdose on iron and there's no point in taking something if you don't need it. So get your blood levels checked and see, but often, particularly menstruating women will suffer with low iron, but it can also be an issue in perimenopause. So if you feel fatigued and you've tried the things we've talked about today, check your iron levels and take a supplement if you need to. Magnesium can be helpful if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having heart palpitations. Pretty much everybody in this country is deficient in vitamin D, vitamin D3 specifically, because of where we live and the impact on the sunlight that we get. So I'd probably recommend taking a vitamin D3 supplement. Creatine, I already talked about, and omega-3s as well can be helpful for lots of things, but particularly for brain health. Another question, somebody said, does anybody else have a problem with wind and how are they managing it? Is it just a diet thing? So I certainly had lots of issues with bloating, which I guess relates to wind as well. And it's definitely a big issue. Our gut suffers from that same inflammation, suffers from all these changes as well. In terms of what we can do about it, we want to make sure we're nourishing our microbiome, and this answers to lots of things, but nourishing our microbiome, so making sure we're getting a wide variety of different whole foods. But if you are going from a relatively low whole food diet to a higher whole food diet, there's going to be a lot more fiber in there. That's brilliant. That nourishes our microbiome. But that, if you do that too quickly, that can have impacts either in terms of constipation or diarrhea or bloating or wind. So introduce those changes slowly. Often we start to put on weight around our midsection, and so our clothes get tighter, and that can lead to wind and bloating. So check, it's not just that your clothes are too tight around your stomach. Check on your hydration as well. But if you're still having issues, speak to the doctor. I thought there were more questions on this slide, but I can't see them. There was a question about weight gain. So in terms of weight gain, I think I've kind of answered that, but how to reduce weight gain. Make sure we're building those muscles, because we store energy, glycogen in our muscles. So if we have more muscle, we can store more energy. If we can't store it in our muscles, we store it as fat. The muscle helps to control that circulating blood glucose, which helps with our insulin sensitivity, which again can lead to weight gain. So more muscle protects against weight gain. We want more sleep. Loads of reasons why lack of sleep leads to weight gain. We want to make sure we're getting in enough protein, partly to support the muscle, partly because protein is more satiating, makes us feel more full. We want to support our microbiome, so that varied whole food diet. And we want to reduce stress, because stress leads to higher levels of cortisol, which can lead to that weight gain, particularly around the stomach. There are I did lots more on weight gain and stress for Menopause Awareness Month last year, and all of that saved in the membership. So I go into way more detail on both of those in resources which are in the membership. And then there was a lot of questions, or a few questions coming in with this idea of struggling with being slower than we used to, comparing ourselves to our old times and getting demotivated, feeling that we just couldn't kind of carry on training because we were getting demotivated. And I think actually I already added something on this, but just to say, go back to that idea of our mindset. Is this thought serving me? Now, this is a whole module that I do in the membership in that Feel Fit Foundations course, so I can't do justice to it here, but always asking ourselves, is what I'm thinking, is what I'm saying to myself, is it helping me? We can change our thoughts, but it takes time and it takes practice. So if we're always asking questions like, I'm comparing myself to my old time, I'm not good enough, I don't want to train if I can't get those numbers, is that helping you? Or can we start to change our thoughts? Can we change it for a thought that's going to serve us better? Can we think about, rather than just focusing on I used to be faster, can we change that to I just want to be the best I can be? Or focus, I train because I enjoy it, not because it's about chasing these numbers. I train because I enjoy it because it helps me to feel better. So changing our focus to one that's going to motivate us more, help us more, and probably then get us better results in the long run. Right, that is, I think, the end of me talking. So let me have a look through the questions and make sure I've not missed anything. So lots of stuff about bras. I think lots of people in the chat have all given good recommendations on that. In terms of getting measured in terms of bra size, again, people are answering in there to get the right size. So I used to have a resource on that and I can't think. I don't know, Keely. There's lots of specialist bras, and I think it's Mary were in the news recently because Serena Williams was wearing one of her bras. I'm not going to answer that because I don't know the answer right now. My brain is whirring. I've heard lots and lots of resources on it, but I don't know where to point you right now. Sonia Miller asked, can you take testosterone and compete? Is it banned substance? I think I've answered that. No, you cannot, or you can, but you would be liable for, it's banned. Lou said, creatine made me really bloated. So creatine, when you look at the packet, when you first buy it, it recommends doing a loading phase of 20 grams a day for, I think, 5 days. You don't need to do that loading phase. You could just go to the daily dose, which tends to be about 3 to 5 grams a day. So don't worry about doing the big loading phase, do the lower dose of 3 to 5 grams a day. But secondly, take it over time. So generally creatine comes, you just dissolve it into your water or whatever drink you want. I put it into my protein shake. Sip it slowly over the day. If you down it in one, it's coming into your body and your body's got to deal with it all in one go. If you sip it slowly through the day, that can really help to make a difference. Somebody has helpfully shared a list about what's prohibited. Thank you. And Jess is saying what I've just said, doing a couple of grams and increasing slowly. Shock absorber, Sweaty Betty. When I polled my clients on recommendations around bras, Sweaty Betty came up high as well. Testosterone, in terms of how you take it, you get it from the GP, definitely, and you'd have it in a syringe. And I was just listening to a really interesting thing today about how the guidelines of how much you take, and you need to have it in a tiny, tiny syringe. I won't go into the detail. I'm not an expert on it, but yes, speak to the GP about it. And Gemma, I can send you a link to the thing that I was looking at today. People saying that testosterone has been a game changer for them. So somebody saying she went through menopause over 10 years ago, still has sleep problems, restless legs, itchy skin. She takes magnesium and vitamin D, nearly 62. And sorry, I missed your question out. I know that I remember there was somebody who said that they were 61 and were still having issues. So what I would say to you is everything is, well, once we finish going through menopause, as I say, our estrogen is still low. So we still have those impacts. But if you are still having loads of issues, I would go back to your GP. So if you're already on HRT, which I don't think you've said, you might find it hard to get prescribed at 60. Previously, the guidelines were don't prescribe it to people over 60. I just looked today and that seems to have changed slightly, but it's going to be harder to get a prescription. But you might find that helps if it's within your risk profile. But there's other things. So CBT for insomnia, which is not a replacement for things like HRT, but if we can't take HRT or if we're still having problems sleeping, speak to the doctor about that, see if there's other things that can be helped with. Do I coach women who have chosen not to take HRT, and do you notice any difference? That would be impossible to say. Yes, I do, but you can't compare one person to another. You literally can't compare one person from one day to the next. So I couldn't tell you, yes, in my experience, people on HRT, people not on HRT. I will tell you that I have lots of clients that are just starting to go on HRT when I start working with them. And generally, they might have to go, as I say, through those few tweaks, trying to get their prescription changed or whatever. But generally, most women find that it is positive for them. But everybody is different. I'm not saying that blanket we should all be taking HRT, but I would certainly be considering it. Creatine, a powder's better than pills, so you can get it in powder form. I've not seen pill, but I'm sure you can, and you can get it. I've got pill, like gummies. I would say go with what works best for you. I don't know the evidence on that one way or another, but I used to find that I wanted the gummies. Then I've actually just changed it. I put it in my protein shake. Then I know I've got it in every day. So, and Jess has said exactly the same. So I would go back to that answer of whatever works for you best is going to be the thing that is best for you. Oh, uh, somebody saying that working on nutrition has really helped. Working with sports nutritionists has helped. So, yep. Psyllium husk can help with constipation, loose stools, wind, bloating. Just make sure you drink plenty of water with it. Yes, I didn't know it helped with wind, but yes, good call. Thank you, Ali. Could you take testosterone as long as it brought your levels to an acceptable level for a woman? And I think that you're talking about in terms of whether it's legal in competition. The answer is still no. Exogenous testosterone, so testosterone that you take, is banned. My argument is if it's only bringing it to the acceptable level, surely it could be that should be accepted. That's an argument, but that argument is not one yet. So no, currently you cannot take it in any form, whatever your level is, if you want to be competing legally. Helen says for itchy skin, she uses Aveeno, very thick cream, use it after every shower. And I presume she's saying that that helps. Could you take testosterone as a recreational runner? Yes. If you're not going to be tested or if you're not worried about using something that is banned, that is your choice. So if you are running in any race, you should not be taking testosterone if you want to play by the rules. It's up to you to take that choice as to whether you are happy taking that. I think you can tell from my views where I stand on that, but I can't recommend it, obviously. And I'm absolutely not recommending doping. But, you know, if it's going to make you feel so much better, we need to weigh up which is more important, competing or, you know, your life, your health, your relationships. But that is very much a decision you must take. But to be clear, it is banned in competition and out of competition. Somebody else said Urax is good for itchy skin. Somebody else. So I haven't seen any other questions. If you want to unmute, please do unmute now and you can ask your question. Bear in mind that means you will be on the recording. If you've got other questions, please type into the chat now. And what I'll do is I will stop once I check that there's no more questions coming in. I'll stop recording and I'll stay on for a bit longer. So anybody who wants to ask but doesn't want to be on the recording, I'll stay on for a bit longer. I'm waiting and I'm not seeing, but I'll wait a bit longer. If you've got any feedback, please do let me know. If you found the session helpful, then, oh, yep. Can you recommend creatine that's suitable for vegetarians? I used to know the answer to that, Liz, and I can't remember the answer. I'm pretty sure that they say it is suitable for vegetarians, and I don't understand why, because creatine comes from meat. I'm pretty sure I've looked into it before and, you know, check where you're getting it from, but I think that you can get vegan or vegetarian creatine. And as I say, I don't understand how, but I think you can, but I'm hands up, I don't know the answer on that. Is getting up 4 or 5 times a night to wee during menopause? I'm not quite sure what the question is, but is that normal, I guess? In terms, definitely as we get older, males and females, we tend to go to the toilet more through the night. And that obviously then impacts on our sleep, which is an issue. I would say make sure you're not drinking too much just prior to bedtime, but do hydrate. Often we stop hydrating and that has more impact. So make sure we're hydrating, but not just prior to bedtime, but work on that pelvic floor as well. Often when we think we need to wee, it's not because our bladder is full, but because we haven't got a strong enough pelvic floor, or because we've got that, we get into a habit, we get urge incontinence, where we kind of have a thought and it makes us feel like we need to wee. Like if you're ever camping and you feel like you need to wee because you know what pain it's going to be to do it. So make sure you're working on your pelvic floor. And if you're worried, again, see a doctor. Thank you, Helen. Helen says, Decathlon do a vegan creatine? I thought you could get it. I don't understand how, but yes. Okay, so I'm going to stop record. Could I recap on how to become a member? Sorry, yes, I definitely can. So if you go to my website, let me go back to that slide. So if you hold your phone up at the QR code, that should take you to the page on my website. If you use that short URL there, that should take you to the page on my website. Or if you go to my website, which is feelfitwithlucy.co.uk, and you do /membership, or you go to the about how I can help section and go to the membership. Basically, find yourself to the membership page of my website. If you Google Lucy Hearn membership, you should get there. And if you sign up on there, then use that code MSHIP5. That will get you that first month for £5. If you sign up by tonight, then you also get that free one-to-one coaching call with me. If I don't get the recording out until tomorrow, I don't know if I will get it out tonight. If I don't get it out until tomorrow, I'll extend that offer and I'll give details in the email to make sure that you've got time to sign up. But ideally, sign up tonight. There's the details there. And somebody else had said, my protein creatine is suitable for vegan and vegetarian diet. I thought so. I thought that my protein, that's where I get most of my protein and creatine from. And I thought it was suitable as well. So thank you, Ali, for adding that in. Okay, I don't think I have missed anything else in there. As I say, I'll stop recording now. Each time I say that, I get not interrupted, but I start looking at another question. I've seen another one, but I'm going to say it now. I'm going to stop recording now, and then I'll stay on for a few more minutes if anybody wants to unmute and ask any questions without the recording on there. Before I do that, I'll answer Jacqueline's question. Which whey protein do you take? I take my protein because it's generally fairly cost effective and okay quality. And I just get a whey protein powder as it is. And then, as I say, I mix that with some, I put it with oat milk because I don't like it to be too creamy. I put in a bit of decaf coffee and I put in a bit of sugar to give it some flavor. Somebody else has recommended bulk powders. They're good as well. Yep, Teresa uses my protein as well. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now.